Well, here we are back again. And there have been a lot of criticism. In fact, it's been crazy, hasn't it? Over here is Mel, my good friend. Hi, Mel.
How's it go? Yeah, no, it's been a lively few days in terms of the response to the debate. Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, in fact, it's been great for you because your hits have been going astronomical and enormous
Yeah.
amount of people. They love what you're doing and they love what you're saying. Some people have said that I'm making an awful lot of money. I don't make any money from YouTube. Have you noticed there are no advertisements on this channel? I stay away from that purposely because I'm not interested in making money off of this material in that way. Also, someone said I must have made a load of money in that talk that I gave at Calvary Chapel. I didn't make a cent. That was not why I went to Calvary Chapel and did that talk. So please stop these rumors going around that we're making loads of money. Now, let's get on to what we're doing today. And the reason we're even doing this episode is because there has been so much criticism about some of the ideas that were coming up across. There's also been criticism of us, but we're not going to deal with that. That's not important. We're used to being criticized. I'm used to it. It comes with the territory. It's something that listen, spending 25 years at Speaker's Corner, if you don't have thick skin in this business, you don't belong in this kind of business. So we're
Exactly.
not even going to talk about some of the acrimony and some of the hate that has been directed our way. What we want to talk about are the ideas that have been directed our way. And that's something that we're interested in because, in some ways, this is what we call peer review. We've been working on this for many, many years. I have been working on this since 1995, so we're talking about 30 years. And so it's still important that we do take what they're saying seriously. And I have asked both Jai or Jai. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Jai or Jai. Let's just say Jai. Let's do that because it's very close to Jay. I'm close to my name. So Jai, I asked him to write down what his major points were because I don't have time to look at these 2 hour, 3 hour, 5 hour videos that they're putting up against us. I would love to know where they have all that time to do that, but I'm too busy to do that. And so other people have looked at it and have come to me and said, Jay, they're attacking you on this. They're attacking Mel on this. There's been a lot of attacks on the Mahmoud argument. And even to the point where they're saying, desist, do not use this anymore. You should know. Let me see one that just came up yesterday, and it was fascinating what he says. Let me be blunt first. It is utter nonsense and should not be repeated. Not a single point Mel has made is correct. These kind of hyperbolic statements do not help in this type of discussion. Please stop those kind of statements. We're Let me just
Yeah.
ask help people understand. Much of what Mel and are doing are what we call green papers. This is what politicians do in Britain. They put out green papers out to the press to feel the waters, to test the waters, to see what the reaction is going to be. And so, an awful lot of what we have been saying, and we have said this for years and years, most of what
Yeah.
putting up on the videos, both on his Islamic origin site and on my site, Fander Films, are these green papers saying that this is where we're at now in August of 2025. Here is where we're at. So please, please, this is what you do when you do research. When you research, obviously, there is going to be some reaction. People are going to come back. I look at all the comments. Mel looks at all his comments. Mel, you respond to your comments, don't you? You do that quite a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, and I think I think that a few viewers have said to me, I like the fact, Mel, that if there's a dead end, you acknowledge it. If I realize actually the evidence doesn't support something, I put my hand up and say, yeah, there's nothing in this, and I drop it. I don't continue where there's no evidence. But I do look at the evidence. I don't go, oh, I don't like this piece of evidence. I'm not going to look at it. I look at all pieces of evidence, and some of the evidence is contradictory. And then that forces you to decide, well, is this piece of evidence better than this piece of evidence? Or is there an explanation for why these two things could both be true? Or, these are the sort of things you have to do. And it's iterative. You go around in a process. It's not like other people's approaches, that say if they're critiquing Islam in terms of the internal critique, it's a totally different process. And I think people assume that it's the same process. It's not. And I like to think that I'm doing it in with good faith and being very honest and upfront. I always have my sources mentioned in my PowerPoints. Sometimes, well, we're human beings, we make mistakes. I try and correct them as much as is possible. But also the other thing is sometimes if I'm explaining, or even sometimes I'm just sharing a resource with you from, say, someone like Oleg or Kerr, there's a good chance that maybe there's a very subtle point that you may not quite get, and that might mislead you. But hopefully, a lot of the time, I try and get back to you and say, no, 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 I think he meant this, you know. But I think sometimes I think the criticism is fair, but sometimes I think they are presenting us as if we're bad actors in this. We're not. I think I know you, Jay, now for a number of years, and from my as well as I know you, you're a person who intends to present the truth as far as you know it, and the same for me. I'd like to get the truth out as far as it's humanly possible. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
I think also some people think that my research is completely askew. Let me just make another thing clear. I don't do the research here. People like Mel are my major researchers. I can't give you the names of the other ones because they don't want their names in public. Mel is the only one who will go public. God bless him. He is actually putting his face above the parapet and allowing people to attack him personally, which is very evident in the last week, which is one reason his YouTube site is going so strong at the moment because of all these attacks. Now, I have researchers. Listen, I have about 7 researchers who do the research for me. Not one of them is going to go public with his face because this is a dangerous piece. What we're doing is very dangerous. What we're doing is cutting out the foundations of Islam historically. And because of that, you will get death threats. This is the only area of study that I'm aware of where you will be killed for what you're saying, even on YouTube. I have to be very careful when I travel. I don't tell people beforehand where I'm going. I tell people after when I've been there because people do come up to me and I have been beat up. I've had my throat opened up before. I do get death threats. Mel has to be careful for that very same reason. And that's why it's important that you understand when we're putting out green papers, these are nothing what we call what if scenarios from what we've seen. And the reason we have to do this is because most everything that we're touching is brand new. Most of the stuff we're doing, it's just being either researched by the experts, and we're taking what the experts are saying and we're putting it out there, putting it up of the parapet. Dr. Robert Kerr has been one of the best one. He doesn't mind his name being associated, especially with the Mahbad argument. He doesn't have time or the expertise or is not willing to go and do YouTube videos like we are, but he loves it that we're doing it because we're taking his material and we're being his loudspeakers, his mouthpiece in the public sphere, where it needs to be. I think it needs to be. He spends his time in academia and he spends his time. Remember, this guy reads and writes 10 languages. He's head of department in Brussels, where he does everything in French. He's also head of department in Saarland University in Saarbrücken, Western Germany, where he does all his teaching in German. He also heads up the Inata Group. The Inata Group, if anybody doesn't know, that this is probably the most distinguished academic group in Germany of distinguished academic scholars. All of them have chairs. All of them belong to universities all over Germany, and they get together every 2 years and present papers on much of this material. And what we're doing is taking their material
yeah,
and then we're broadcasting it, getting it out in the open. Some of them ask us not to use their names, so we don't use their names. However, almost all of it is getting peer reviewed in academic circles. And in academic circles, what we're doing is actually quite normal. But we're saying, let's get
yeah,
peer reviewed immediately. So as soon as Mel or I put up a video, within seconds, we're getting responses. You can't get better and quicker peer review than that.
yeah.
Robert Kerr has said this many
Which,
times. When I write an article or I write a book, but especially an article, it may take 2 years before someone responds to it, either trying to rebut it or trying to ask questions of it or trying to say, have you thought of this of it? 6 months to 2 years. Mine, we get it in seconds. So you can see why YouTube goes a lot quicker and in some ways is a lot
yeah,
better because this material especially. needs to get out there. Now let's get back to let's go ahead and what I asked Hi to Jai to do, and also Thaddeus. I asked both of them. I don't have the time, neither does Mel have the time to look at 3.5 hours or 5 hours. And because of that, could you please just footnote or bullet point your major points? So both Jai, well, who has taken the material that he is asking concerning the Mahmud argument that he and Daughter of Christ put together, and so did Thaddeus with putting the material that he and Mary put together. And they sent it to us yesterday. So we have it, or I got it maybe 3 days ago, but Thaddeus is just yesterday. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go down. I'm not interested in confronting them. Please, folks, and Thaddeus has asked me to warn anybody. Would you stop, please? Would you stop throwing aspersions against Thaddeus and Mary? Please stop that. That doesn't help anything. Those Thaddeus says that my fans are actually very rude and crude. Listen, fans, if there are whatever fans you are out there, please tone down the rhetoric. These are ideas that we're working with. These are ideas that we're still juggling and we're still manipulating and we're still
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
see how it fits to the larger picture. Now, when I go public and actually when I go to places like Calvary Chapel, at that point, we pretty well know that what we're saying is legitimate. And that's why I think what caused so many people so much anger amongst these four people is that video that did a little over a month ago at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, has gone to over a million. It's probably 1.5 million people, and it's still growing. It has gone viral, and I think that bothers them, and they're fearful that if this gets out to the Muslims, folks, this has been getting out to the Muslims for years, that somehow that's going to discredit the Christianity. No, it's not going to discredit Christianity. It will discredit us if we're wrong. We're the only people that are putting our heads above the parapet saying this. Thaddeus and Mary, well, actually, Mary did say this, I think, about 5 years ago. In fact, you found an article that she wrote, did you not, Mel, where she said exactly the opposite of what she's
yeah.
saying now.
Well, yeah, she uses the very arguments that that you're using about Mecca. She has written it up in an article, and they were perfectly fine a few years ago, but all of a sudden they're no longer true. Which I don't understand why she still has it up there. So she either believes in those arguments or she doesn't. And I can't speak for Mary, and I'm sure she has a response for why the arguments that she uses are okay, but when you use them, they're not okay. So,
Yeah, which coming back, I mean, let me just say this. There is a friend of mine, Chris from Speaker's Corner. Chris and I, we have worked together. He has worked on a lot of this material himself, and he put an absolutely brilliant video up about 3 days ago. Go and see it. I'll put the URL down here, and I'll put it also in the I mean, in the description box. He put up a brilliant video looking at the debate that happened last Thursday on my birthday. And he said the reason why so many people are upset with us within our Christian community, these are Christians. I'm not getting Muslims upset. It's just Christians, and really four Christians: the Thaddeus and Mary and Jai
yeah.
and Daughter of Christ. Those four. The reason they're so upset with us and they want us to stop this is because of two reasons. One is that they think that this, what they call the myth of Muhammad, will fall along the same parameters of the myth of Jesus, the Jesus myth. And Jesus mythicists is what they call them. Now we're called nomos, as Ibrahim called us, or we're called the mythology, the Muhammad mythicists. And they're fearful that what happened with the myth of Jesus will boomerang on us and hit us as well. And Chris said, he's very clear about this. Listen, nobody's just going to take what two individuals, myself and your Mel, is going to destroy Christianity and destroy and create a myth about Jesus. It's not going to boomerang back on us. It's not going to boomerang back on us at all. If anything, it's going to make Jesus stronger just because we're always comparing Muhammad to Jesus. We're always comparing the Bible with the Quran. We're always comparing Mecca with Jerusalem. When you compare the two, there is no comparison. When you look at Muhammad and you look at Mecca and when you look at the Quran and you compare it with what we have in Christianity, it just shows how solidified everything we have, how solidified it is in history. So don't worry about that. people. It's not going to destroy it. It is not dangerous in that sense. And they keep on saying this is dangerous. We might need to shut them up. Please desist. Stop doing this. And I'm saying, please calm down, calm down. You don't need to attack us. This is going to help Christianity. It's going to help us. Why? Because you always want to get to what the truth is. And we have dealt with these questions for 200 years. Since the 1800s, we're having to deal with whether or not Jesus existed, whether or not he lived or was born in Bethlehem and grew up in Nazareth and died in Jerusalem. We've had to support that. Since the 1800s, we've had to support whether or not we can support the historicity and also the viability and credibility of the New Testament documents. So that's why this is not a dangerous thing to do that we are going to touch. And I have to kind of laugh at their hysteria about this. We must shut up because this is going to hurt us as Christians. And I stop and think, what do you think they're doing every day? They're calling Muhammad's
For
all kinds of
Christianity, this
names.
is nothing new.
I mean,
Yeah,
look at the things. David Wood, especially, he takes pages out of the Quran, tears them, and eats them. And that's not going to cause an awful lot of anger and danger for Christians. So be careful of your rhetoric. Be careful of your hysteria against us. The second reason Chris says that this is going on is that he thinks that if this takes and this grabs hold and people start using this, which we really hope they do, it will eradicate the whole foundations of Islam, and then there will be no Muhammad for them to attack. And I'm sitting there and saying, hold on a minute. This is an academic
isn't that the whole
argument.
point?
We're talking about academics who are just everything we're doing, and we're quoting other academics. This is an academic argument that's way up in his stratosphere. This is what's happening in seminaries and madrasas. This argument will destroy, yes, it will in time destroy the whole edifice of who Muhammad is, what the Quran is, and whether Mecca ever existed. Those three areas especially. It will absolutely annihilate the foundations of Islam. And it at that time, when it does, it hasn't happened yet. When that filters down into the madrasas, when that filters down into the mosque, when that filters down onto the prayer mats of all the believers, and they start taking it home and then realizing, ay, 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 there is no Muhammad. You mean there's no Mecca? You mean everything we have been following is nothing more than a legend? When they realize that, there's going to be an enormous attrition from Islam. And that should be a good thing. Why are people upset with that? I want to bring Muslims home to Jesus Christ. I want to bring them home to the truth. And
Yeah,
I make no
absolutely.
bones about it. And I've said that for years. However, and I said this to Raymond in the debate. I said it to Raymond in the debate. Please don't stop what you're doing. Continue to attack Muhammad. Because that Muhammad, at right now in August of 2025, that Muhammad is still the prophet of Islam in the minds of 99.9% of all Muslims. Over 1.9 billion people still follow that Muhammad, still read that book, and still go to Mecca to do the Hajj. So do not stop attacking that. Not historically, we'll do that job for you, okay? Let us do that job for you. You continue to do that because we still need to show how hopeless and how irrelevant Muhammad is. And the same thing with the Quran and how absolutely heinous some of the things that are going on in Mecca are and what's going on culturally around the Muslim world today. That needs to be confronted. That needs to be put up in the public view. So please, Thaddeus and Mary and Jai and daughter of Christ, do continue what you're doing. Please don't stop. Don't ask me to stop, is all I'm saying, okay? You're saying that we should stop this, please. Let's be clear on this. We're both working at the same goal. We both want Muslims to come home to Jesus Christ. We want them to know Jesus as a personal Savior. We want them to believe in the death and resurrection and the fact that because Christ, the historical Christ, did die and rise again, we are all going to be in heaven together. And I want this 1.9 billion people to be there with me. I can't wait because I love them more than anybody else. And I hope you love them as well. And I hope you want what we want. So can we work together on this and stop telling us to desist what we're doing because it may be too dangerous for Christianity? No, it'll be dangerous for us, just like what you're doing. The four of you, it'll be dangerous for you. And I understand that, and that's why you don't put your faces up there for Jai and Daughter of Christ because of your backgrounds. And you have perfectly right to do that. But Mel and I, who do put our faces up, the only danger is going to come to us, all right? Not to Christianity and certainly not to the church. Okay, back to you, Mel.
Yeah, I suppose one of the arguments that they've made is that it's not going to have any impact on Islam. But I get emails, I don't know if you get emails, I get emails from people in Iran, in Syria, you name it, and and they hear these arguments about the historicity of Muhammad, and they're sharing it between their families and friends. So it is having an impact. It's all under the surface. But like if you look at Iran, it's like 50% have left Islam. You know, it's probably more than that, but it's at least 50%. And what gives them permission to leave Islam? It's the fact that they can be sure if there is no Muhammad, if the stories are all fake, then they don't need to worry about going to hell because of not believing in this. As long as they have an inkling that maybe this person was real, as in the Muhammad of Islam, then they're afraid in case they get it wrong. So
Yeah.
I think it gives freedom to Muslims in a way that maybe other um, apologists don't realize. You know, okay, we are pioneers here. We are having a small impact now, but we are planting seeds and the harvest will come long after we're gone, and that's fine. We're not here for the harvest. We're here to plant seeds for the future. You know,
Well, actually, I am here for the harvest. I'll
that's it.
correct you on that. I really
Oh,
am, and
okay.
we are seeing the harvest. Listen, we are seeing. I don't think a
Yeah,
month goes by when I don't get either one or two emails personally to me. How they sometimes they have to borrow to get emails just to tell me because of this video that you did on this day, I left Islam and I became a Christian. I get this over and over. I'm collecting them, but I have to be careful that I don't publicize this and say who they are. So what I usually do immediately, the first question I ask is, God bless you. Thank God you are now in the kingdom of God. Who are you and where are you? And can I get you a church to get into? And I get them into a church locally. So this is happening all the time. I mean, let me give you another example.
yeah,
Just that video that we did back in 2016 when we held up those 26 different Arabic Qurans at Speaker's Corner. Just that video
yes,
alone,
yeah,
because of what we did, that caused such a furore within the Muslim community that the interview that had to happen in 2020 between Muhammad Hijab and Yasser Qadi, you all saw that interview, it was only 28 minutes. That came out of that one video. And at the end of that interview, because we put it up there, well, they put it up there on their sites to begin with. They put it up both on their YouTube sites. In the next intervening the subsequent 2 weeks after that video was put up in I think it was June 10th, 2020. Look at the comments. There was hundreds, I mean virtually hundreds that I counted of Muslims that say I'm no longer Muslim because of what you have admitted. I'm no longer a Muslim and my blood is going to be on your shoulders. There were hundreds of Muslims that left Islam because of that admission by Yasser Qadi just 5 years ago. Now, who is the one that put and got that put together? It was Hatun Tash, our colleague, by finding those 26. So don't say this doesn't have an effect. Now, have they come to Christ? No. That's why always, 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 we always have to end with the gospel because it does us no good to sit there and shut down the Quran or shut down Muhammad or shut down Mecca if we don't also at the same time ask the same question of our scriptures and our the Lord Jesus Christ and also our place. So we have to make sure that we bring them home. We have to make sure that we have an alternative, and we really do are the only ones that have that alternative, Mel. So let's go to say that we aren't making no one has come to Christ because of it. Just I mean, I wish I could share, but I cannot and I dare not share these publicly. So I usually do not, and I don't even like to talk about it. But I am absolutely interested in the harvest. And I'm also interested, as what you say, Mel, that there's going to be an enormous attrition because most of what we're doing right now is academic, and it's remaining at an academic level. It's not yet come down into the public
yeah.
sphere.
I think just to clarify, the point I was saying is that the harvest that I'm talking about is when it's like becomes like a tsunami. I
Yeah.
know there are people coming to Christ now, but but it's only a trickle in comparison to the way it will embed itself because these pieces of information are getting out there. People are hearing little bits and pieces, and it's creating doubts. You know. But
We're chipping
okay,
away at that edifice called Islam, and we're also hammering the holes into the coffin of Islam, one hole at a time, holes in the narrative. You're right. And these holes need to continue. We need to continue hammering those holes. So, for those of you who are naysayers, as many, a number of you are, I understand why it may threaten you, but don't let it threaten you. It doesn't threaten Christianity
yeah,
in any token. And it only
no,
threatens me if we stop doing what we're doing. Please
yeah,
let us continue what we're
yeah,
doing. Okay. Now, Mel, I think another problem that people have concerning what you and I are saying, especially on your channel, a lot of people, a lot of these four people think. I think the difficulty is they don't realize the kind of caliber of people that you have that are watching. Say something to that effect, because you, in some ways, you have a very unique channel, and not like mine. Mine is much more of a
yeah,
populist. It's a popular environment, and so therefore, I have about 100, over 120,000 who come to my channel. Go ahead, speak to that if you don't mind.
yeah. So my focus in my channel it's kind of a dry material. It's kind of intellectual. I don't try and polish anything. It's just pure interest in the ideas. So I have lots of people who have got qualifications in linguistics. For example, I have one guy who actually helps me out a lot. He's a pure genius. He has a great knowledge of Aramaic, Hebrew, Arabic, you name it, Greek, and he pulls me up on anything. If he sees I'm off on anything, he sends me an email and says, no, Mel, you can't say this. You need to change it to this. Um, and obviously, I have contacts within Anara, so I send emails to different people in Anara just to check out things. I have people who work in military intelligence, believe it or not. I got a comment from a guy the other day. So they're a serious group. They're not interested in personality attacks or any of that. They're interested in the ideas. They don't get offended. They understand what I'm trying to do, and they give me a bit of slack if I make mistakes because they know I will come around and go, yeah, that idea didn't work, or I've got my facts wrong. It's usually the areas where I'm weakest would be, say, linguistics. Usually, my linguistic guy will pull me up and say, no, that word is in this language or whatever is the issue. So a lot of the time, people might get the ideas. These are just my ideas, but usually, what happens in the background is I'm checking with these people, and like when you have a body of people who are linguists giving you their opinions, you're going to find a spread of ideas. It's not like one linguist knows it all and can pontificate to other people and say, no, this is the only way that this can be interpreted. That's not the case. Linguists have differences of opinion. And even the guy who's my linguist, uh, even he gets corrected by Robert Kerr, who's a philologist, and he says linguist is nothing. You have to be a philologist to really get a handle on things. So I would what's the word for it? I would take Robert Kerr's opinion over a linguist's opinion when it comes to linguistic matters.
Yeah.
But for most things, a good quality linguist will get you through most things. So I remember praying about it before, and thinking, oh Lord, I haven't got a great memory like Jay, and I haven't got these skills. And I just got reassured. You know what? When you don't have these strengths in certain areas, people come to you and people come to help you, and that's been my experience. And I just bring to it whatever I bring, and hopefully between the community together, we kind of we push forward and we correct things as we go. That's my approach anyway.
Let me just say this also. One of the things I've been really impressed with Mel is not only the fact that he is able to move and with the material that's there. He's always started, and we've always said this dictum as a group, that whatever the evidence on the ground, we will then change, and depending on what we find, we will then move with that evidence. But we need to make sure that it is field tested. And so one of the reasons why we even put it out there is to field test it. That's why the green papers are absolutely important. But the great thing is, because Mel is does things so seriously, he's like a flies coming to feed on him. He gets the best and the brightest. And you can pretty well tell right at the beginning by their comments whether or not they have done the research on this. And both Mel, I do this as well, but much more Mel. He gets and he grabs them, and then he starts this communication with them, and they exchange emails. I don't even know if you've met any of these guys or gals that you're using as authorities. Have you met any of them?
A few of them, a few of them I've met over Zoom. So, a few I've met in person. For example, there's a guy who is from Malta, and he has been an absolute treasure trove in helping me to understand the development of Arabic in the island of Malta, and that history is fascinating. I think, like, just to take one example, he led me to really appreciate that Arabic isn't like hermetically sealed. Like some linguists think that Arabic is here and then there's Hebrew speakers over here and Aramaic speakers over there. That's not the way it was in the 7th century. A lot of the societies were using Aramaic words while they were talking Arabic. They were using Hebrew words. They were using Ethiopic words, and they didn't go, oh, I wonder what this word means in the etymology of Arabic. They were like taking a word and they were writing it in an Arabic script, and they understood the meaning as it was used, for example, in Hebrew. And that's part of my argument when we talk about Mahmed, which we'll come to later, is that is an example of where they're taking a word. And like we've already covered, but most of the religious vocabulary that you find in the Quran is from the Aramaic, because Arabic didn't have those words in the language, because it was, it was the Syriac people who, that was their thing. They had the development in terms of religion, and they had all the vocabulary. They just basically brought it into the language. You know?
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and let's get right into your let's go into your PowerPoint and let's go and start looking at some of the ideas that they're confronting us with, and let's try to answer them as best we can.
Okay. So we're going to be responding to the critiques. We're not responding to the critics as such. So we're focusing on the arguments here. Uh, so the big one is what Mahmed means, okay, in the different forms that people give it as. So one of the points is that Mahmed does not mean blessed one, anointed one, or Messiah in any Semitic language. So I'm going to kind of deal with that. And I would say at the outset, no, that wasn't what was meant, and there's been a bit of misunderstanding. And the origin of this, when I went back to kind of see where where this idea came from, because I wasn't saying Mahmed means that's the one, not precisely. Oleg's obtuse wording on this matter caused confusion. He cites its meaning in Ugaritic as desirable or precious, but then suggests that the word is part of a cluster of related messianic words. So the related messianic words carry meanings like blessed one, anointed one. But the impression was, maybe you, Jay, got the impression, but and it's just the way he writes it. The impression was that Mahmed also then means blessed one. It doesn't. We were clear that it meant desirable in the Ugaritic, and likewise in the Hebrew, it carries that meaning over. Masi or Messiah means anointed one. So that's what means anointed one. So to clarify, Mahmed doesn't mean blessed one or anointed one. I did try to make that clear to Jay that Oleg meant linked by association, and mea culpa, as they say, if that misunderstanding came across. So I'm quite happy to correct that record. And I'm going to show the slides where this came from, just to point out how this happened. You can see there that at the very top, we're accused of never saying that it meant desirable or precious in the Ugaritic. It's there. That's what we said. And he says, so he says that the basic Semitic meaning of the verbal root might be finding something desirable. So the particle might be translated as the chosen one. There he's talking about in the sense of it it could be taken as like a synonym. I think that's what he meant. It's unfortunately that's a misleading way he put it, and perhaps it misled both of us maybe in at least initially. Um, and here I think it's much more clear. Oleg suggests Mahmed can be understood as linked by association with the chosen one. It doesn't mean it actually means the chosen one. So that hopefully that clears that one up. Do you want to say anything on that, Jay?
No, and I think I'm not. I think the difficulty is what they're arguing is that Karl Heinz Oleg may be wrong on this. Is what they're. I hear what Hai is saying, that he is wrong on this because he is saying it could be, and I think that's the difficulty that many people today. are looking at what Arabic is today, and it doesn't mean that and back then. And they're saying, well, the Ugaritic doesn't even mean that, so why is it you're imposing that on today? And I think the difficulty, you need to be careful that we don't impose what we know today on what they were saying then. And Carl Heinz Oleg is looking and seeing how this, am I correct, how this evolved through the ages.
Um, I think his argument is that there was a collection of words, like a cluster of words, that were used to describe the Messiah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so for
You're
example,
saying,
Messiah, the anointed one, that's one word, and there's a separate word like Machmed or Machmedim, the plural, which is giving us more information. Okay, he's the desired one, as you find in Song of Songs. That's the point. It's not that all of these different words mean. It's not like Machmed means anointed one. No, it's just that it's associated with other words. Does that make sense?
yeah.
That's what Oleg was saying in a very obtuse way, and it's confusing. But hopefully that's clarified it.
I think the problem
He's
that Jai and Thaddeus are coming up with is that because they may have intimated that we should not take it so strongly, that therefore it is it. And I think it's because we're saying so emphatically it isn't, it is it, that they're upset with that. In the same
yeah
token, it could go both ways. That argument can go both ways. The fact that they don't want it to be because it doesn't fit their narrative, we should they're saying therefore desist from it, don't use it. And I think be careful. There is a subtlety here. There's many ways to, as you're saying, in that time and in that age, there are many ways you could appropriate that word and give a definition for it. That we need to be careful in the 21st century that we don't demand it only say what they want it to say.
yeah. I think like you can describe someone with multiple adjectives. Okay, so Jay, if I described you as handsome, intelligent, and I don't know, hilarious, right? But these are
That's not a
separate
very good
words.
description. It doesn't fit. None of those fit.
But that doesn't mean just because these are various words I'm using for you. It doesn't mean that I'm saying that these words mean the same thing, does it? You know, that's Oleg is just basically saying these are distinct ideas about the Messiah. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's the point. So hopefully that's resolved that misunderstanding for everyone. Um, okay, so the other thing that was brought up is in Hebrew, Machmed is a common noun, and in Ugaritic, Machmed is an adjective, both meaning desirable thing or precious object. Now, as far as I am aware, didn't refer to the grammar when I first introduced it, but on my slide, which I have here, you can see very clearly under Machmedim, it's in the small red rectangle. You can see clearly they have noun there. Uh, so uh, so they're arguing that I didn't point out that it's a common noun. Well, it's actually there on the slide. So because I didn't verbally say it, does that mean I suggested something other than what's on the slide? So I think that's a bit unfair. So if they just look at what's on my slide at least and give me the benefit of the doubt. The other thing is, which I want to pull them up on, um, I just want to go back to Oleg for a second, right? Do you notice that Oleg gives the meaning desirable or precious? He doesn't specify desirable thing. It doesn't say desirable thing, just desirable or precious is what it means. So criticism is that it means desirable thing or precious object. That was what they're arguing. And why are they saying that, Jay? It's because they don't want it to be about a person so that they can wiggle out of it being potentially about the bridegroom, who is the subject of the Song of Songs. So why would they not want it to be about the bridegroom? Because they don't want Machmed in any way to be connected to Christ originally. Do you see?
Okay,
So
I
I
see
think
the
that's a
argument
bit
now. So
disingenuous.
they're trying, in other words, they're trying to impose on you what they want. Again, their narrative, they're trying to impose on you in their criticism, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And here's the thing: they think that by saying Machmedim here refers to Christ, for some strange reason, they think that just by saying that, that's in some way blasphemous. But actually, this is written long before Islam, and it's about the whole of the Old Testament is all about Christ, the Messiah who's coming. Right? That's not a controversial thing to say, and naturally, yeah, church fathers will interpret who is this person who is the altogether desirable or the altogether lovely. Well, there's a she in this Song of Songs and there's a he, right? And the she, according to many church fathers that they don't seem to read, they again and again say the she is a bride, which is the church, and the he is Christ, who's the bridegroom. This is not controversial to say that. Now, the other thing that I would pull them up on is they're basically saying that we were arguing for a maximalist position, which is that the church fathers need to be saying the word Mahmed for this to hold, but that they don't. All they need to do is to basically argue, like the church fathers only have to interpret the Song of Songs 5:16 is to be about Christ in the language that they're reading it, which was typically Latin or Greek, and that's it. That's as far as I was going with it. So they're it's like a straw man argument, is what I would say. They're saying that we're um, saying something we didn't say, and the maximum argument, and we're saying, look, this is what the church fathers are saying about the Song of Songs, and we can imagine if that's the case that the word in Hebrew, makmedim, would carry the sense of it's to do with Christ. Um, Now, if I use the word title when I was discussing this originally with Jay, it was probably because I'm inheriting that word from people like Oleg. He liked to use this as title, but I'm quite happy to back away from that and say no. I shouldn't have said title. I should have probably just used the word adjective or noun or term or something like that, and that's all. That's all it is. So I don't see why they would object to what the church fathers have said. Um, Now, I suppose the other thing is they say, well, in order for this argument to work, the church fathers have to say exactly all of these things. They have to say Macmedim, they have to quote this, and they have to say it's about Christ, all in that um, in that quote. It's very like an argument I heard Muslims using, which is, where did Jesus say, "I am God, worship me"? It's the same sort of argument, and I'm surprised that they're using that style of argument. We would never apply that standard to the Bible ourselves, especially when it comes to the Trinity. So why are they expecting that level of me in terms of interpreting the scriptures? Do you want to respond to that, Jay?
Yeah, there's a number of things I want to respond to here. Let me just make sure so everybody gets this, so that we're very clear on this. That the Mahmedim of Song of Solomon 5:16 is referring to Christ in the eyes of the early church fathers. They're seeing that as the
Yeah.
bridegroom. Uh, and the bride is, of course, the church. The bridegroom is Christ himself. So, ironically, can you see the irony in this? If that is the case, and they are the ones that are appropriating Psalms 5:16 as the bridegroom, as Christ himself, can you see the irony when Muslims look at the same verse and say that's Muhammad? Muhammad, how many years have we had to deal with that? They're trying to find Muhammad somewhere because in chapter 7, verse 157 of the Quran, it's very clear that this Ahmed, who cannot read or write, this Ahmed is the one it's in the Taurat. So they have to find it in the Old Testament, and they've gone to Song of Solomon, which is rather interesting, because that's not part of the Torah. But they go to there and they see this
Yeah.
is Muhammad, when in reality, what the church fathers are saying is, no, this is not Muhammad, this is Jesus. That's
Can I
I
correct something? Not Can I just correct, or not correct, but actually be very specific here, because I know I'll get pushback again. I am not saying all church fathers. I'm saying some church fathers, because like with any church, you have a whole range of views. Some viewed it just as a love poem. Some viewed it as a love poem with an extra level of meaning, which was to do with the church and Christ. So just so we're clear.
Okay, and that's a good corrective. Thanks for that. But can you not see these church fathers would be read by the populace, and certainly by many of the ministers and the pastors? They would be reading these church fathers' letters. They would then probably preach it in their in their sermons, in their homilies during the week on Sundays. So they would have also come away with the same view. Doesn't mean that every one of them did, but many of them would. So that would be quite a normal understanding of Song of Solomon 5:16 to believe that this is the Mahmadim is Christ. So when it is then introduced later on, like say on the coins in the 7th century, we should not be surprised that this is referring to that.
Yeah,
Not because every church
yeah,
father said it, but some did say it, and this probably became quite normal in that part of the world, especially up in Damascus where that coin was minted. That coin that we're talking about, the famous one with the crosses on one side and Mahmadin and Mahmad on the back side.
yeah. I think it's also worth pointing out that the way that for example, Saint Jerome translated that into Latin, it's very specific in terms of Song of Songs 5:16. So when the church fathers are referencing those exact words, it cuts out the fact that he's talking about some other Macmed elsewhere mentioned, which could be, I don't know, a tree or a goat or some other object, whatever it might be. It's very specific. And when you look at it contextually as well, it's very clear what it is. So, you know, if 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 they if our critics want to go down the road of you need exactly word for word, be aware that you're also undermining the argument for the Trinity by doing that, because then Muslims will quite happily say, well, show me where in the Bible it exactly says the Trinity. I'm sure most Christians are intelligent enough to know that this is the sort of way that we create theologies. Yeah.
So on this note, Thaddeus has written regarding the Song of Solomon's. He says that none of the translations, not even Syriac, look anything like Mahmad Mimha Mimdal. The idea that anyone reading these translations concerning Song of Solomon 5:16 could associate those letters with Jesus is literally impossible. The church fathers, he summarizes, interpret the Song of Solomon allegorically as being about Christ, but no one applied the Greek or the Latin word to desire or desirable to Jesus. Not one of them applied it to Jesus. There is absolutely nothing to suggest that these words, altogether lovely, all desire, all desirable, was used as a description of Jesus, let alone a well known title. That argument doesn't work, therefore should die. He's being very, very severe on this. We should shut this down, is what he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what he's saying is patently false. It's a half truth. So the first thing to point out is the church fathers work and write in Arabic, as far as I know. There might have been some Arabic speaking church fathers that I'm not aware of, but the big ones, the ones that we're familiar with, they were writing in Latin or Hebrew. So it would be a crazy expectation to say, Mel, in order to prove your argument, you need to get them to use that word in Arabic. Okay, so that's not going to happen. Did they use Hebrew? Did they? Typically, they didn't. They used the translation. So when we talk about associating the word with Jesus, we're talking about the word that carries the meaning. So in Hebrew, it was Makmedi. They didn't refer to it directly. They used it indirectly in terms of the Greek or the Latin, and you can compare. For example, when they're talking about Song of Songs, you compare the wording that St. Jerome uses when he translates it with their commentary, and you can see it matches up. It's exactly the same wording. So it's not, and the context is they do also give the context of the bridegroom, the bride. So it's clear, 100% clear to anyone who's honest about what they're looking at and they don't have an agenda. They just have to say, no, the church fathers interpreted 5:16 to refer to Jesus the bridegroom, and that's it. And it's amazing to me that shouldn't be a point of argument. But I think there's a bit of a straw man here, because I think Thaddeus has got the idea that I was saying, that the church fathers were using the word Mahmed. That's not the case. The church fathers are writing in Latin and Hebrew. They're using the translation of the word, and that's all that that needs to be shown for the association. Now, having that commentary on those key verses like Song of Songs 5:16, then we go into the context of Israel or any part of the Middle East where they're familiar with Hebrew. Okay, so the people like Oregon would be very familiar to most Christians. So if they were to read the commentary in Latin or Greek, and then they were to look at it in terms of the original wording, like Hebrew, they would instantly go, "Oh, that word is Makmadim here." So Oregon is saying, "Oh, this refers to the bridegroom." So it's not like they have to, it's not like rocket science that they make the association between the two. So the idea that I think it comes from I think Thaddeus's model is that it's a monolingual world that we're in, where people only have one language and they can't make associations from one language to another. And that's not the case. This is not the United States. This is Syria. This is Iraq. This is the Jordan area where people spoke Greek, they spoke Arabic, they spoke Aramaic, and people were, especially the priests, were very educated. They were taught these languages. And even the church fathers, even though they didn't necessarily use the Hebrew originals because they were able to use the Septuagint, which is in Greek. They didn't need to go to the extra work of actually extracting the Hebrew word because the work was done. So that's it. That's my response to Thaddeus. I think he's strong. He's trying to present our argument in a straw man fashion, and I think it doesn't work. And I can show further evidence, after this
I think that's
in the
important
matter.
that people hear that. I think both Thaddeus and Mary are very monolingual in the fact that they've only had English around them. I may be wrong, maybe they do speak other languages, but you need to go back to that
I think
ground.
I think in fairness to Mary, yeah, I think in fairness to Mary, Mary actually, as far as I can tell, is quite gifted with languages. I think she speaks Arabic from what I can tell.
Okay.
So I don't think it's that. I think it's just their perception of the society, and not Mary's. I think Mary's actually is more knowledgeable than Thaddeus on this point. Um, but I think the perception is that they couldn't possibly know Hebrew, or they couldn't possibly, that's projection. We shouldn't presume because we're used to one language that other people can only speak one language. So, like for example, our good friend Robert Kerr, he speaks 10 languages: Chinese, Greek, Aramaic. He speaks lots of languages. Imagine if I assumed because I can only speak, say, a couple of languages, that it's impossible for someone to speak 10 languages. That would be a ridiculous assumption to make. So why make that assumption about people in the 7th century? So I think that's all that needs to be said. And you know what? Despite presenting this, if Thaddeus still thinks, no, 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 we're wrong, okay, fine, that's grand. You believe what you want to believe. I'll believe what I believe, and I think there's plenty of evidence to support what I'm saying. Even if it's difficult to get that killer quote that he looks for, you know, um, the quote that the Muslims would ask for: "Where does Jesus say I am God? Worship me?" That kind of quote. Even if I don't have that killer quote, I can still make the argument based on context and how the church fathers treat the Song of Songs.
Okay. Great. Let's go
Okay.
back to the PowerPoint.
Um, in Arabic, Muhammad means the one intensely praised, or derived from a different verbal pattern. These are not the same word, nor are they used the same way. So my response is I accept that this difference is there between the Hebrew and Arabic. You can write the word Mahmed in Hebrew letters, or you can actually write it in Arabic letters. When it's in Arabic letters, that word could be treated as a Hebrew word or an Arabic word. It just happens because of the nature of the fact that they're sister languages. Um, that word has an overlap, and if it all depends on whether they are treating it with the Hebrew sense or the Arabic sense. So what I would say is it's not certain if it is a Hebrew word in Arabic script or the Arabic word. It's arguably ambiguous. Murad has found contexts in which the Hebrew sense is implied when used in the Quran, and that's not something I can talk to. But there are lots of examples in the Quran where words are literally just put in Arabic script, but actually are either Hebrew words or Aramaic words. Now, I don't know, Kai, I don't know whether his perception is that every single word in the Quran, for example, is pure Arabic. I don't know if he would go as far as that, or if he's aware that there are words that not just are borrowed, but are actually just literally Hebrew words put into an Arabic script. So I think that's the case with Mahmed here. In Arabic, and I trust Murad on this, it means the praised one, or the one intensely praised, and that's fine. But it may not be what's being used when people in the 7th century are referring to a Mahmed. Um, it may not be that they are using what they consider to be an Arabic word. It could be that they're using it in the form of a Hebrew word or an Aramaic word, especially considering that the majority of people especially in the early part of the 7th century, were predominantly Aramaic speakers. And after Islam took off, Aramaic went down and Arabic took off more. And that's a historical context that needs to be taken into account as well. So, Jay, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think this is rather, yeah, this is not really something that they should be saying. Uh, Arthur Jeffrey in the last century wrote a whole book on the vocabulary of the Quran, where he showed hundreds of words that have been borrowed from Ethiopic, from Syriac, from Hebrew, from Pahlavi, or what we know as the Zoroastrian Persian languages, even from Chinese. And what is fascinating, that's been known for over 100 years. So I'm not sure why they're bringing this up, that you can only say it this way, or it's totally distinct between the two languages. That when you borrow, you can bring the meanings in, and also you can ameliorate. But what's also interesting is they didn't just borrow words; they borrowed entire texts. And so we're doing that right now. In fact, we're in the process of putting together what we call the intertextuality, looking at all of the stories in the Quran, where they have come from, because we can find antecedents to almost all of them, and that's we're going to publish that in about a year. And to say that there is only one way to say it, or one way to understand it, or one way to interpret it or translate it, you're gonna have an awful lot of critics who will blow that out of the water pretty quickly. So I think they
Yeah,
need to be careful of the claims they're making here.
yeah. I would say Joy's argument about how Muhammad is pronounced only works if you interpret that that word is Arabic as intended. If people are using MHMD in an Aramaic way or in a Hebrew way, does his argument hold? I would say not. And so that's where it hinges. And I'm prepared. I'm prepared to say, okay, it's in Arabic. This is how you pronounce it. Okay, fine. But I also will expect him to give us proof of the vocalization from the 7th century, where and the proof that I would accept would be a bilingual text, where in the other language it's pronounced exactly the way Muhammad is pronounced. But I am actually going to counter argue by giving you a proof text to show that we are on the right track when we say that MHMD was pronounced something like Mahmed or Mahmet. That this is what we've been saying the last couple of years. I'm going to give you a proof text to prove that. So it's not just speculation on our part, there's actually real evidence to
Okay,
back
let's
this up.
continue on. Good stuff.
Okay, so the vocalization of Mahmed is not, so the argument is the vocalization of Mahmed is not attested as a word, title, or personal name in Arabic. It has no meaning. If you claim otherwise, provide evidence of that. Well, if you're assuming it's Arabic. Christian Robin, a leading epigrapher of South Arabian texts, has noted that the exact vocalization of Mahmed in Jah 10:28 is indeterminate. So he's no slouch. If he's saying it's indeterminate, how can Jai be so confident? An example will be given of how it was vocalized as Mahmed, which is closer to Mahmed certainly than Muhammad is. So in order to determine the way a word is pronounced, particularly this word MHMD, we need to see its occurrence in a bilingual text. And this is something like what happened with the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone was a stone that was chiseled in different languages, and I won't go into the details of it, but they were able to figure it out by comparison between the texts. So we're going to do that in this case with a bilingual text, which is in Arabic and Greek. And when we look at the Greek and how it's presented, we can see very clearly the way it is pronounced. Okay, this can be found on Islamic Awareness. It's a bilingual papyrus of a protocol, and you have all that information there. And that's what it looks like. And notice that there's a part there. If you go to the middle line read, you'll see in Greek it's Mahomet. Okay, and underneath in red, there's the parallel line in Arabic, which could be interpreted as Muhammad, but actually, given that Muhammad is what's there, it's not Muhammad, certainly. So even if I take the weakest argument here, which is that they didn't pronounce it Muhammad, okay, there's your proof because you have Mahomet, okay? So Mahomet is how it was pronounced, even if they say, well, maybe it's not a T, maybe it's a D. Well, that's even closer to where we're at. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say it was just Mahomet with a T at the end because part of it is missing.
And the date for this is 705. So we're talking about early 8th century. They're still using Mahmet.
Yeah, yeah. So this is like direct proof of what we've been saying. So our critics have been saying that we have no evidence for the pronunciation, and here it is. This is what we've been saying, and I'm using what we knew of the sources. We were able to make the hypothesis that this was the way they pronounced it at that time, and people were saying, no, 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 it was Muhammad. Now we have the evidence; it's there in black and white. Are they still going to say we have no evidence, or are they going to accept the evidence? Are they going to? I don't expect they will. They'll say no, no, it was Muhammad. But there is the evidence, and that, this proves what we've been saying. So we have a hypothesis, we test it out, and texts like this will either prove or disprove what we're saying. This proves our case. So now there's another bit that's in it that's kind of marginal to the thing, but it's actually saying that in this text it refers to God as merciful and philanthropic, which is actually a word that's used about Christ. If you go to the New Testament, but that's the side point. It's not the way we view Allah nowadays. But Allah nowadays isn't viewed as philanthropic, a lover of mankind. Okay, so that kind of leads us to think that maybe we're dealing with something closer to Christianity at that time as well. So I don't know if you want to respond to that one, Jay.
No, I want to respond to what the one you did before. That is a great proof text. That papyrus, I guess that is papyrus, or is that parchment?
It's the papyrus, yeah.
It's
There
papyrus,
it
the
is there.
papyrus that you have there. And this is on Islamic Awareness website. Even they are
Yeah,
willing to put this up. That is like a Rosetta
yeah,
Stone for this argument, just for this argument. And this is dated
yeah,
to 705. So we're talking about the time of Abd al-Malik, the end of his reign. This is the
yeah,
turn of the century. We're talking about a good 70 years after Muhammad's dead, yet they're still using the word
mm,
Muhammad. And this, it's
yeah,
very clear. You can't get a better proof text than that. And I think that should shut
yeah,
that down, that we can't find this word anywhere.
yeah. Okay, so here is a kind of translation, and basically the way it works is they have it in Greek, followed by what it is in Arabic. Now, the part that's Arabic is in italics, and just for comparison, there you can see that in the Greek it's Muhammad is the apostle of God, and in the Arabic is well, of course, Islamic Awareness they insist on saying it's Muhammad is the messenger of God, even though the pronunciation is Muhammad in the Greek. Obviously, they don't want to admit the pronunciation from the 7th century, but there you have it. Um, and I'm sure that this is still a work in progress, so don't expect that I understand everything what's going on here, but it's certainly a proof text of that's how they pronounce it. But I have more proof to back this up as well. Um, if we look at the way the word MHMD was introduced to other languages across Europe, isn't it interesting that the forms of it etymologically come from Mahmet and not Muhammad? Robert Kerr says that such a derivation is not etymologically possible via Muhammad. Okay? So, in other words, it has to come via Mahmet. Not true. It's not possible to get to, for example, you see at the top there, Mahomet, Mahometus in Latin. You can't go from Muhammad to Mahomet. It comes from Mahmet. Medieval Spanish and Italian similarly have Mahomet and Mahoma and Mahometa and so forth. And even as late as the 1200s in Middle English, you have Mahomet. So this is another problem for people who say, no, it was pronounced Muhammad in the 7th century. Explain that for me. Why is it that even centuries later, how is it that so many people across Europe are hearing the word and putting it in their own language, like with a T at the end, notably, but they're not pronouncing it as Muhammad. You know, the closest maybe in the 12th is Mahomet. That's beginning to be like Muhammad, perhaps, but it's not there yet. Jay, your thoughts?
I'm just sitting here loving this. This is music to my ears. I think for an awful lot of people, it's good that you're bringing it all together, and this is why it's good that that Thaddeus and Mary and Jai and Daughter of Christ have thrown these things at us so that we can, because we need to hear where people are itching and we need to scratch where they're itching. And it looks like a lot of the times that we were putting this up, we didn't really define this or give the proof text for what we were saying because we were going so fast. This was just one of many arguments
Yeah.
that we're putting together. So it's good that you're now meticulously trying to answer their very questions. That's what peer review does, and you're responding to that peer review. So this makes
Yeah.
absolute sense. But I mean, you're talking about even as late as 1200, they still didn't use Muhammad, which is
Yeah.
then understands to me that really this idea of that Muhammad has to be there in the 7th century is another. We're redacting it back. We're imposing it back from how we speak it today, and that needs to stop. We must not do that. That is not only etymologically correct; it is also historically incorrect, and it's also
Yeah.
academically dishonest.
Yeah, my friend in Malta who has been studying the origin and development of the Maltese language. I think he said it was about the 11th or 12th century there that it switched the pronunciation to fit with the standard Islamic narrative Muhammad. It took that long. So there's something in that. I may not know or be able to give people 100% guarantee explanation for why that happened, but isn't it funny how it all fits in with what you've been saying, Jay, when you're talking about all of the manuscripts appearing centuries later to do with this, the standard Islamic narrative, the Hadiths and the Sirah and so forth. Isn't it funny how the Muhammad version comes in around the same time as the name switch from Mahmed to Muhammad? I just think that's
For a finalized form for every one of the manuscripts starts to appear in the 11th century and continues up into the 16th century. Before the
Yeah.
11th century, we get bits and pieces, fragments here and there, which obviously were not destroyed in the purge of all the earliest material. There has been a purge all the way through from the 9th, 10th up until the 11th century, and then they started canonizing the text. This looks like also that the same idea of Muhammad, the name was probably introduced at this time. And I'm guessing that's why when you look at all the references to Muslims, they call them Mohammedanism. You notice they also refer
Yeah.
to it as Mohammedanism. That's where you're finding it at this period. So look, not only is the name introduced, also the religion is given that name, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
We're just talking off the top of our heads, folks. Please, this is a green paper, okay? This is a green paper. Don't yell and scream
Yeah.
and holler at us. But I'm suggesting it possibly you can see that we need to look into this more and see why is it's all starting to percolate at the end of the Abbasid
Yeah.
period, moving into the Ottoman period.
Yeah.
Now, the other point that was raised, it has, so Macmed, he says, it has no meaning. If you claim otherwise, provide evidence of that. So what I would argue, if used in that way, it would be used only as a Hebrew word in Arabic script. Perhaps Aramaic, I haven't looked into that, certainly Hebrew. For example, so to give you a parallel, Sadia Gain, the 10th century, sometimes transcribes Hebrew biblical terms in Arabic script when writing for non-Hebrew readers. So there is a precedent. Is that the word? It might be whatever they. Well, there's certainly, this comes after the time, so maybe it's not precedent, maybe not be the correct word, but there are other examples of Hebrew words being put into Arabic script, is what I'm saying. And in the Quran, for example, you have words like Israel and Harun and Musa and so forth, which are basically Hebrew words that have been put into an Arabic script. And as I said earlier, nearly all of the religious vocabulary in the Quran comes from either Aramaic or Hebrew. So why not Mahmed? You know, Mahmedim is just simply Mahmed in plural form. If they were talking about Jesus, for example, they could just simply use the singular form, so it makes perfect sense. In a multilingual culture of that time, Greek, Aramaic, and Arabic were used and words mingled interchangeably. So the idea that Hebrew Mahmed carried no meaning is absurd. That's what he's saying. It doesn't carry any meaning. But why wouldn't someone who speaks Arabic and knows even just a little bit of Hebrew, it don't have to be fluent in it. They surely can get the meaning from the Hebrew, especially these languages are so similar. I just don't buy Jai's argument there. I think, as again, I'll just repeat myself. I think his concept is that each language is hermetically sealed from one another, where words don't ever get exchanged across the language barrier. I think he thinks that, but that's not the case. People at that time were using Aramaic words and Greek words in, even when they're talking Arabic, they were using these words. So the idea that you have to have the etymological meaning only from Arabic is just nonsense. Um, Lastly, numerous philologists recognize that things are not as neat as the above critique suggests, where each language stays in its own lane. It's just, Robert Kerr does a great analysis of the mix between Aramaic and Arabic in one of his papers. He gives a lovely map of Arabia Petraea and Arabia Deserta and so forth, and talks about that's a paper that you find on Academia website. I recommend it. It's a short paper, but it shows how things weren't as neat as Jai would like us to believe. It was a lot more messy. So the next topic will be by use by the church fathers. But I just want to, before we go on to the Jai, just throw it back at you. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, about 10 minutes ago, there have been hundreds of words that have been borrowed. This has been well known for 100 years now. Arthur Jeffrey in the 1930s wrote a whole book on just this very thing. So I'm not sure why Jai thinks that Arabic is unique and it is isolated in that term. Even today, where I mean, look how the English language has morphed into so many other languages. So many of the words we use, like computer. You go to most every other word, every other language, they now will use the word or computer, except for French. French, it's ordinateur because they refuse to borrow from English.
So say you take a word like computer and a similar word is produced in another language. They just literally copy the way it's pronounced. It would be ridiculous to say, well, I've looked at the etymology of this word in Russian and it doesn't mean anything to do with something that you would use to compute with. It doesn't exist in Russian. That would be a silly argument. Um, all someone has to say is, well, actually, in English, the etymology is computer. That's where it comes from. So, if Mahmed makes perfect sense in Hebrew, and Arabs take it and use it in their language, even if that word exists separately, like for example, as in we'll say Muhammad, or let me see, Mahmud or Muhammad, or all these other variations of the word, depending on where you vocalize it. Okay, even if they have a separate word which means highly praised or something like that, it doesn't prevent parallel word from Hebrew being used with exactly the same script. but with a different meaning. I'm sure there are examples of that in English as well.
I mean, here's a good one. I mean, whenever you say, "Man, those are bad threads," when you hear someone say that here in America, people kind of say, "Hold on, what do you mean threads?" What they're talking about are clothes. So threads can be something that you needle and
Yeah.
thread, or it can also mean a piece of cloth or something you wear. Bad usually means not good, but in this case, when you say bad, that means nice looking piece of clothes. So when someone says,
Yeah.
"Look at that woman with those bad clothes," look at that lady over there who has a beautiful dress, is what they're saying. Completely different meaning,
Yeah.
but the same word can be used in almost opposite fashions in this case.
Yeah. Yes. So I think like I see what Jay, I see what Jai is getting at. I commend him. He's obviously very knowledgeable in Arabic linguistics, and I don't discount what he's saying. But like a lot of linguists, they tend to kind of look at things in a very linear fashion. Things are following the rules, but maybe they don't. Sometimes a weakness of linguists is sometimes they don't see outside the box for other possibilities, you know? So I think there's an explanation for that. I think it fits with the wider context of the argument that we're making, which is that we're talking about a messianic movement in the 7th century, and you have to go to the Hebrew for the messianic meaning. It's not there in the Arabic. We'll grant them that, but it is in the Hebrew. And like everything else in the Quran, oh, where's our vocabulary coming from? The religious vocabulary, it's all coming from the Aramaic. That must tell you something. I don't know if Aramaic existed down in the Hijaz in the 7th century. I doubt it. Maybe there was, but it certainly existed up in places like Syria and Iraq, you know. So it makes logical sense. They may not agree with our arguments, but you know, we have evidence for why we say what we're saying, you know.
Okay, let's go
Okay,
back.
so the next thing that I want to focus on is the question about use by the church fathers, which was something that Thaddeus was very incensed about. Um, so the arguments are no church fathers ever use Macbeth as a prophetic title or name. Um, and I would argue this is a straw man argument. That isn't what we claimed. They did not write their commentaries or homilies in Hebrew. They wrote in languages such as Latin, Greek, Syriac, etc. I would argue, from my side of it, yes, I didn't claim otherwise. I didn't claim that they did. Um, if anyone claims the church fathers use Macbeth as a title for Jesus, the burden is to provide a clear reference showing the actual word Macbeth, uh, not a translation of it, but the explicit usage of Macbeth. Again, this is a straw man argument. I'm not arguing that they use the word Macbeth. I'm saying that the concept has been associated. They're using the translation. That's the argument. So they're dismissing the argument. If Macbeth were truly a title for Jesus, that's a loaded term title. I've walked away from title. I'm using the word term. How did it disappear from Christian usage? Why are we only now being told that allegedly Christians for hundreds of years called Jesus by this title? Um, right up to today, I'm a Catholic. We still today turn to the church fathers in terms of looking at what the Bible means. So I don't know where they got the idea that the church fathers are no longer used by Christians today. So they look at Song of Songs. I can only speak from the Catholic Church. I'm sure it's a similar case in the Orthodox Church that they viewed certainly one view of the Song of Songs is about the church as the bride and Christ as the bridegroom. So that's the case. It doesn't have to be a title; it's just a term that's used, an adjective or a noun that's used there. Um, did you want to come back on that, Jay?
You know,
You okay with that?
I think this may be a problem that I had that he claims, and it's true. He says that I said that Ambrose was writing in Syriac when I should have said his writing in Latin, and so that was a mistake I made in the heat of the moment and that talk that I gave at Calvary Chapel. I do make a mistake here and there, and I need to ask forgiveness for that. And I've already said that too. I think it was Thaddeus at that point who said I should never have done that. That's true. Um, uh, there, I will make sometimes something incidental that I shouldn't have said. I have I have been vilified for years now by other Christians. It's interesting. It's always Christians, never Muslims. Um, when I have mutawafika at one point when I was in Australia a number of years ago, I said muatafika. Instead of mutawafika, I said muatafika, and boy, did I get it in the neck for years. It's still people still remind me of that, and so these are mistakes because probably my platform is so large. Because my platform is so large, it gets out into into many more people. People yell at me and holler at me for getting things like that wrong. So this may be more my problem than yours. I think he is attacking me on this rather than you.
Okay. We're human, mistakes can happen. But, I think that certainly it's something to learn from it. We can correct these things under videos by putting a little comment. I try and do that in descriptions and things if we make a mistake.
Yeah, and let me
But,
just say something else. I asked Thaddeus to do this because I understand he went and put up this video attacking me publicly for these supposed mistakes. As we're finding out that almost all of them are not mistakes, rather than coming to us first. And I
yeah,
asked them in the future, just if you have a problem with some of the things I said in that meeting there in Calvary Chapel, for heaven's sakes, just tell us. Give us like you did. Give us, and I said, give us a bullet point of material. And that's what we ask everybody to do. We ask people, look at the
yeah,
comments, write in the comments, tell us where we're wrong.
yeah,
And when we're wrong, then we will correct it if we find we are wrong. But
yeah,
going out and spreading it all over the world and then laughing at us and calling us liars and saying that we're making a lot of money off of this, that doesn't help anybody. And it doesn't help the person who's saying that. I think this is why so many people were upset with him and Mary because they were making accusations without first talking to us first. And as we're seeing
yeah.
now,
I don't.
these accusations were actually not very good accusations. They were not, they were hollow in most of them.
Yeah, like I don't usually kind of say this about people, but I don't think it's a very Christian thing, way of doing things. I think, as you say, fraternal corrections are great, and I encourage it. But please come to us, in a respectful manner, privately. Give us an opportunity to respond, but don't just assume the worst. Don't assume that we're just lying or we're bad actors. We are on the same team, and we are trying our best to be as truthful as possible. But we're all human. We all make mistakes, and I hold my hand up, and I'm sure Thaddeus has made a mistake once or twice in his life. Maybe he's never made a mistake, but I'd like to shake the hand of a person who's never made a mistake. So, but I'm being sort of slightly joking there. But Thaddeus needs to be fair with people. Don't we're not on these channels to attack people. We're here to deal with arguments, and we don't need to. The thing is, we don't need to personalize these arguments as well. If we make a mistake, that's human.
I asked them that very question. Why didn't you come to me first before you went and splashed this all over the internet? And
Yeah,
I said, I would appreciate it if you would have come to me first with these arguments, and then we could have done a video and responded to them like we're doing right now. And his response was, I don't have to because you went public, therefore I can go public. I think that's
yeah,
the wrong attitude. I think that's why so many people are upset with Thaddeus and Mary, is that they're using this
yeah,
for clickbait. They want to get lots of numbers. And they want to use our reputation to help them make more numbers. And I think that's what's going on. At least that's what most people are telling me is going on. And
You know what, Jay?
that may be so,
One
but
of the
I think
things.
still, as Christian brothers and sisters, we need to be
Yeah,
careful that we don't slam each other in public and
yeah,
then make an awful lot of money off of that. Uh,
yeah,
I know that Thaddeus, he said so in his letter to me. He said, "Listen, I spend most of my time shutting down and confronting Muhammad Hijab and making fun of him, which is
yeah.
okay. I understand that. I don't do that. I think that's to me, it's a waste of
Right.
time because in years from now,
Yeah,
no one's going to know who Muhammad Hijab is. I would
yeah,
rather that you confront the ideas
yeah,
rather than the people. So stop this
yeah,
confronting us and just tell us where you think we've made a mistake and we'll look at it and we'll unpack it and like we're doing right now we'll try to then show you that no these are well thought out. What Mel is doing on Mahmoud, this is his material, it's not mine. What Mel's doing, he is now supporting, and I love what we're doing here because it is important that if they think we have made a mistake on this, that we then need to make sure that we respond to that if it is a mistake.
yeah. I would also point out as well, we're presenting an art. Well, I'm presenting it in Jay as well, I suppose. we're presenting an argument. This is not an attack on anyone. You know, it's not that we're trying to destroy their arguments or anything like that. We have our own road. We're following our own path. I don't have time to look at Thaddeus' channel, or actually pretty much anyone else's channel for that matter, because I just don't have the time. So there's none of this is personal, and it shouldn't be treated that way. So don't get caught up if we disagree on something. It doesn't matter. You know, I'd like to think we're all good friends and we're all part of the same team. So anyway, shall we move on?
Let's go.
Okay, so another point that was made is you also claimed that Ambrose, applied Machmed to Jesus as a title. He never did that. In fact, he never used the Hebrew word Machmed in any of his writings. Also, in Song of Songs, the word is Machmedim, not Machmed, and it functions as an adjective, not a title. Okay, so I think Jay may have misunderstood me. I'm throwing you under the bus, Jay. Apologies. In my slide, my wording is that the word was associated by the church fathers with Jesus. So I think you said that you might have picked it up wrong. Was that right?
I'll have to go back and see exactly what I did say, but I did say that they would have used the word Mahmed or Mahmedim for
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. We've no evidence. We have no evidence that that was used. Maybe they did, but we don't have. But that was never that was never the point. The idea was it was associated through the language that they were using.
Let me
And
back up real
again, the
quickly.
word,
They
yeah,
do use it for the bridegroom, and who is the bridegroom?
would be Christ. Yeah,
Bingo. So why is it you're saying that
yeah,
they didn't use it for Jesus?
yeah. Well, I think they're saying that they didn't they use the exact Hebrew word. They're using the Latin translation or the Greek translation, but I think that's a bit pedantic, to be honest. It's the same concept, the same words that's being referred to ultimately through the translation. Um,
Ambrose and
so
Origen and Augustine and all these church fathers were referring to Song of Solomon 5:16. Were they not assuming, were they not therefore appropriating that the altogether lovely one, the Mahmedim, as the bridegroom, who is Christ, who is Jesus?
yeah, that's that's
That's
how
all we're
I
saying
would
at
think.
this point.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I'm saying here, I agree with this correction with some provisos. However, the word is Machmedim, not Machmed. This is only a plural versus singular difference. I think that's minor. It's nonetheless applied to Christ by the church fathers, as it will show. The argument that they must use the original word to make an association is simply false, and we never apply that standard elsewhere when it comes to the Bible. The meaning was associated. Hebrew, Aramaic, or Arabic speakers would use Machmed in that place. Well, I actually correct that. Maybe Arabic speakers, maybe as in the sense of borrowing a Hebrew word there. So, and again, notice that the claim isn't that Mahmedim is a title, but that is became associated with the Messiah. So I think that's hopefully clarified things and corrected any misunderstandings there. The church fathers associated the meaning of this term in Latin and Greek with Christ. I've not said that the church fathers were writing Arabic, so they were not using the Arabic form of it. They use its translation, and it simply is an adjective or a noun. I don't want to get caught up with differences between adjective and noun. It's a word describing, you know, the altogether lovely. To me, that's like an adjective. It's linguistically, it's termed a noun here, okay, but it's describing Christ here. It's used about Christ in some specific cases that the church fathers refer to, but some church fathers consider the Song of Songs as merely a love poem. Others do consider it is about Christ and the church. They use the translation of the word Macmedim and not the original. So hopefully that's clarified that. So here's the point, really, the argument. Logically, if A is B and B is C, then A is C. I think most people probably have heard this syllogism before. So A, Macmedim means B, altogether desirable. The Vulgate Jerome has it. Et totus desirabilis in English, and he's altogether desirable. That's how Jerome translates it. Now look at B. Altogether desirable refers to C, Christ. So here's the quote. What else is meant by altogether desirable than that Christ in his entirety, his words, his deeds, his mysteries, is the delight of the soul that loves him, Oregon. Okay, and there's the reference. Okay, so you see so far, I've established here A means B, B refers to C, so therefore, I think it's logical. According to Oregon, A, Mohammedim, refers to C, Christ. I don't see how we can get away from that. Even if he doesn't use the word Mohammedim, he is using the translation. Jay, what do you think? The
I think like I'm a
I've lost you.
primary school student right now. The fact that you have to explain it this simply so that everybody gets it, to me, is a little laughable. But I think, yeah, I
Yeah,
think everybody gets your point. That yeah, we are
yeah,
Oregon, Jerome, they are referring to Christ. So whether or not you
yeah.
use Mahmedim or in the plural or as an adjectival adjective or a noun,
It's
in
just,
every case people that were reading their writings all knew what they were talking about.
yeah. So the church fathers deal with the term in its translation in Greek or Latin. It's a pity we have to go over this, but anyway, here it is. Opithemia in the Greek, and it's translated as so they take the Hebrew word, and the sense that they have is holy desire, whereas in the Latin one, the sense that Jerome gave it was altogether desirable. So you find that in some church fathers, they're 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 referring to Christ as the holy desire, in other cases altogether desirable, depending on which they're using. Okay. Um, so do the church fathers associate Christ with the idea of altogether desirable and wholly desirable? The objection that Thaddeus might make, well, there's words like Mahmed that are used in other contexts, you know. So okay, and here are some examples from around the Bible. But that doesn't mean that in the case of altogether desirable that argument holds. So in the context where it's used in altogether desirable, the church fathers are clear that in this context it means price. So I don't know, does that make sense? So it's not that in every instance in the Bible Mahmed refers to Christ, but in this particular instance in Song of Songs, where it's used as a common noun, as they've said, as altogether desirable. That's what we're talking about. Um, so, um, so let me see. I've given the English translation there. I've given the Latin for people who want to just fact check me there. There's Oregon. I think that's self-evident. So I'm going to move on, Jay. Ambrose. Um, Here you can see he says, there's a quote from his book, De Isaac. The soul finds in him every delight, in his word's sweetness, in his sacraments' beauty, in his mysteries' desire. Therefore is he altogether desirable. Okay, so I think it's pretty evident that it's referring to Christ again. Now, how does and again, I know I'm going to get some pushback because people think that Augustine might have interpreted a different way, and maybe Augustine interpreted songs in the way that Thaddeus thinks. But I have here a source here. Augustine incorporated Tychonius's 7 rules in his own work on biblical interpretation. Okay, so this is how Augustine goes about interpreting the scriptures. Okay, so those that say that Augustine would interpret the altogether desirables about a thing are simply not aware of how Augustine interprets the Bible. So he follows these 7 rules. One of them is number 4. The fourth is concerning species and genus. For species is a part, but genus the whole of which it is a part, as each state is a part of the whole province, and each province a part of the whole world. Okay, so this rule goes on to say the same thing occurs in the case of men. Things are said of Solomon, for example, the scope of which reaches far beyond him, and which are only properly understood when applied to Christ and his church, of which Solomon is a part. So what does this mean in a nutshell? Song of Songs is about Solomon, but according to this rule of interpretation, it would then apply more than just Solomon. It would apply to Christ and his church. That's how Augustine would have approached Song of Songs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we know what Augustine followed in terms of the rules for interpreting the Bible. So when he saw Song of Songs, he would ultimately not just conclude it's only about Solomon. He would conclude it's about Christ and his church. Okay, and we have an example here. Now it's about Psalm 45, but the same would apply to Song of Songs. And in this here, you see that he is applying the meaning of bridegroom and the bride there to do with Psalm 45. So we can see that Augustine would apply the same in Song of Songs. It's the same principle being applied. Now we have this quote here. Augustine talking about the Canticle of Canticles, that's the Song of Songs. It sings a sort of spiritual rapture experienced by holy souls contemplating the nuptial relationship between Christ the King and his queen city, the church. Okay, I won't go through all of it there. This supports what I've said about Augustine in terms of Song of Songs. That's how he sees it. So who is the Macmedim according to Augustine? It would be Christ the King. Even if we don't have that killer quote that Thaddeus is looking for, it's only fair to see that Augustine sees the entirety of the Song of Songs as being about Christ and his church. Do you want to come back on that, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, he's written here that that n nowhere the author, in this case Augustine, says that the godly man is the all lovely, and the entire work it comes from is about living the Christian life, not a commentary on song or the person of Jesus. It's about the church, is what he's saying. And in fact, he says that for almost every one of these church fathers, that Song of Solomon was only ever referring to the church, not to Jesus. I think what you're doing here, this is good because you're actually going and what we didn't do, I say what Thaddeus and Mary and Jai and Daughter of Christ is they've not looked at our videos on this. I mean, this is all I've heard all this before because we've gone through this many, many, many times
Yeah,
over the last 2 or 3 years. But
yeah,
they're not aware of our videos. They're not aware of you've already unpacked this. You've already quoted this. So
yeah,
when we get up in public and actually say it in public, we don't go through all these quotes. We just list them, boom,
yeah,
boom, 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 assuming
yeah,
that the people there know where these quotes are. So in some ways, maybe I think Thaddeus and Mary are only taking what I said in the last month and assuming that I was talking ex nihilo without ever having unpacked it for our hearers and our viewers. And I don't know any way to get around that, Mel. It's
yeah,
good you're going through
yeah,
it now. It's good that we're going through these quotes again.
yeah,
It's good that we're unpacking it. It's showing that every one of the church fathers, when looking at Song 560, they were looking at the bride of Christ and
yeah.
Christ himself.
Um,
The church is the
yeah.
bride of
I,
Christ.
I, I, like I don't know how the way Thaddeus thinks, obviously, but given that clearly Augustine is has this in bold here, it's black and white. I don't see how that stacks up with what he has said in terms of his interpretation. Now, Thaddeus is totally free as a Christian to interpret the Song of Songs whatever way he likes. But that's fine. But this is what Augustine thinks. So all I'm saying is this is what Augustine thinks. If Thaddeus doesn't agree with Augustine, that's a different matter. But that doesn't in any way touch the argument. So that's all I would say on it.
Yeah, I think what Thaddeus
Um,
is saying is that we have misinterpreted Augustine. I can see now that we haven't, and you've done a great job, Mel. And I think that's why it's
yeah,
good that we have this in front of us. People can see it.
yeah,
We're kind of reviewing what we've done in the past, but not
yeah,
everybody watches what we've said in the past. And so, in some
yeah,
ways, that may be may be desirous that they did before
yeah,
they make these accusations against us.
yeah. Just where like as an additional thing, so it's you can see here the Song of Songs 516. I'm sorry if it's going to be pedantic for people, but you can see actually I've put in bold. It says, "This is my beloved." Now, any Christian worth their salt would immediately prick up their ears when they see "beloved" there, because you'll know in the baptism of Jesus, what does God the Father say to Jesus? "This is my beloved." Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So this is loaded with meaning for Christians when they read this. You can see that this is about Christ. It's not like impossible to interpret or to understand this. But I think that's probably sufficient to put that argument to bed. I think Thaddeus isn't correct. Um, I could go further here. Theodorus of Cyrus, he gives a long explanation in his commentary on the Song of Songs, and he clearly says that in this, for the divine Logos knows the church as bride, and it terms Christ the bridegroom. He's clear as day that's what the Song of Songs is. So my critics need to really read things fully. Not that I've read all the songs, but like, be honest, investigate it, and look how they interpret Song of Songs. Um, and then Theodore, then he kind of does a paraphrase of the phrase "altogether desirable," but he has prefaced it by saying the Song of Songs is about the bridegroom and the bride, Christ the bridegroom. So it's like it's unescapable that that's what he means by Macmedine. That's about Christ. So that's it. I think that's plenty on that. Um, if the Hebrew word Mahmed is written in Arabic script, I think I've covered that enough, as I'll skip that one. Another argument I've said, you cited the church fathers incorrectly. For example, you said St. Ambrose wrote in Syriac, he wrote in Latin. I think you've answered that, Jay, already.
My apologies. I get crucified for that. I'm more than willing to stand accused, and I should have never said Syriac. I should have said Latin. You're correct.
So in verdict, St. Ambrose didn't write in Syriac but Latin. I'm glad we've clarified that, and apologies if we've misinformed people on that point. Okay. Response to Muhammad was the word they
Go
used in
back
the
a minute.
7th century. Yeah.
Here's the irony of it. So far, you have been able to support everything you've said. The one error they have found is not you, it's me. I'm the one who made the mistake here. And I've already apologized that. I don't know how many times I've done that to different people. So please don't stop hammering Mel. He didn't make any mistake here. I'm the one that made a mistake. God bless you, Mel. Thanks so much.
Well, listen, Jay, I'm going to throw myself under the bus as well. Okay, so I did make some mistakes. I'm going to have to admit some mistakes. So I have used ChatGPT to find some sources, and Thaddeus, I think in his email to you mentions, there's it's hallucinated one of the quotes, and I did look it up to check, and I triple checked, and he's right. There was one part. Now AI obviously analyzed Augustine, and came to the conclusion this is what Augustine would say, and said he would interpret it as the bride and the bridegroom. Okay, it's not completely wrong, but it's not a direct quote. I'll admit my mistake on that one. But it's hard to find these quotes. Like, an awful lot of the church fathers material is lost, and it's hidden behind paywalls. So, like, be fair, like, we're trying our best to find these quotes, and even the bits that I was able to confirm here and share, it took me a few hours today to find those. They're very hard to find, but they are there. Okay. So we're going to move on. Response to Muhammad was the word they used in the 7th century, even if diacritical marks didn't exist. I think this was Kai's one. If the grammar matters, so should the spelling. Okay, this is how I would respond. If the etymology of the word is linked to its spelling, then surely the spelling matters. Is the word Mahmed or Mahmed? If both, which is the dominant one? What are the earliest spellings of the word in the sources? And if it is a name, shouldn't the spelling be the same? Why the variation? So I'm kind of throwing out questions really back to Jai. So if Muhammad is the name, why are we seeing variations in the spelling of the name, like massively different variations? That needs to be answered. Why is sometimes a D? Why is it sometimes a T? And why is it no one seems to be able to nail down the spelling? So there's a lot of confusion. So I don't think we can be so categorical about it. Do you want to say anything on this, Jay, before I move on to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that real quickly. The Mahmud would be the Arabic spelling. The Mahmud would be the Persian spelling.
Yeah, yeah.
Arabic would be further on the
Uh,
west in what is today Nabatean Aramaic, what we call Jordan in Syria today. Mahmud would be more on the east. That's what it would be in
yeah,
Iraq and in Iran today.
yeah. And actually, even the fact that if it's spelled mostly Mehmet early on, and then but eventually settled down to Mahmed, let's say, or even Muhammad, that seems to suggest that the sequence of events is that starts in Persia and then moves on into Arabic speaking lands. That's one interpretation you could. It's not, might be tenuous, but at least that the pattern is there. We should take account of that. But so Thomas the Presbyter spells it with a T, and here's the example. Okay, and we've read it as Machmet, and okay. Now, Sebius also has Machmet as well. And then if we go even to the Hispanic Chronicle in the Latin, you have Mahometo, which is again very similar. It's just Latinized Mehmet. So that's worth pointing out. If we go to Sasanian coins, you have Mehmet again. Okay.
Which is
Mehmet
again
is the
Persian.
messenger
The assassinating points would be from the Persian background. There's the
from
fire
Persian,
on the bottom,
exactly. Yeah.
one.
Yeah. So if it is Muhammad, well, why don't they just put it MHMD? Okay, it's written in Pahlavi, but couldn't they just say no? His name was Muhammad, so there needs to be a D because that's his name. There's no good explanation really if it's a name. T fine. They tend to put T's on the end of it, but I think if it's a name, really, they should have got the name correct, fully correct, especially on a coin. It's no, I don't think that's a particularly strong argument I'm making there, but but if Jai wants to insist on the linguistics, right? He needs to also be honest. I'm not saying he's not honest. I think he's a very nice and honest guy, but he also needs to own up and say, well, actually, the early sources we have is MHMT. So I throw it back at him and say, okay, tell me what MHMT means in Arabic etymology. Go ahead and explain it to me. You're the linguist. I'm not the linguist here. Tell me what it means. I don't think there's any meaning to it in Arabic. So I don't know. Have you ever heard of the meaning of Mehmet in Arabic? I don't think there is one. So
No, I think you're right.
knock that one out of the park. Um, and bit Jay out if you think I'm pushing back on Jai too much there.
No, that's fine. You need to say that. That's good. Let's continue on.
Yeah. Now, next topic, rabbinic literature and titles. Okay. You mentioned Jews in Baghdad using Mahmed as a title of endearment, specifically Mahmed bin Uziel and Mahmed bin Joseph. I've checked digitized Hebrew libraries in Hebrew and have not found any matches for those exact phrases. There are no rabbinic usages of the word Mahmed in the way you described. So my short answer is I haven't ever claimed that we had evidence for that. The most that the evidence showed was that some believed that Nehemiah bin Uziel was a Messiah and that they were expecting another to come at some point in the 7th century. What I did say was there was an inscription in 523, which was by the Lord of the Jews, by the Mahmed. Okay, and we deduce from that is possible that that's the same thing. It's that they're using Mahmed in the sense of Messiah there. That's as far as I went with it. Now, I think you might have said Mahmed was used as a title, Jay. I think.
Yeah, I think what they're referring to, and this is something that I have said in the past, you have said in the past, about a year to 2 years ago, we did say, and I remember even we did a video together where we thought that there were five exilarchs who had Mahmud before their name, and that these all five were in the 7th century. And we now no longer are saying that because that was something that we had assumed back then. But then now that we've looked at the sources more carefully, we're now pulling back on that. The reference to Mahmud ben Husiel or Nehemiah ben Husiel or Mahmud ben David, we don't see any sources for that. We don't see any reference for that. So that today,
Yeah.
now in the 2025, we're really going back to the 523 inscription, which is from the Hadramaut area, what is today Yemen. That's the inscription, that it is a Jewish inscription. And here I can put it up here real quickly for you to see it. And you can see that it's very clear that Mahmud is used by the Jews there in the early 6th century. Do you want to say anything about that? So that's what we're pointing to, not the other ones. And that's why it's important that we do say this is what we're saying at this date. We no longer say this at this date. And so now in August of 2025, we're no longer saying that.
Yeah. The only thing I would point out is that my argument about the Messiah bin Joseph and bin David, I still hold to the Messiah bin Joseph bin David. It just I'm not saying that the exilarchs that there's evidence the exilarchs themselves would have been directly referenced that way. I can only show the evidence of them being referred to as Messiah bin David by Messiah bin Joseph. So I just want to make that distinction. So we're not quite there. Like, it'd be great if I could show you the smoking gun of Mahmoud bin David or whatever. That's not the case. So I don't have that evidence. Now, I do want to point out something like that Red Judaism had said to us before. Um, and this might be maybe part of the idea that there was evidence of this was Red Judaism suggested that there was a council of elders called Mahomet. And actually, you find this in the Talmud. That this is not wild speculation. It's not though the same word as Mahmet. Okay, there is a nine between it's very similar, but it's not the same. In the Talmud, this applied to the representatives of the people present at the temple service. Um, However, it is a different word from Mahmet. Okay, now I noticed that when they translated this word, it's highlighted there. They avoid translating it in English. Now, I think it might be because they're afraid of people going away thinking, "Oh, there's Muhammad," or no, but it's there. But it's now there's a note underneath point number 3 there if people want to read that. But that's as close as you get, but it's a different word. It looks similar, but it's not the same. So I'm not even going to consider that as a possible Mahmed there. It looks similar to maybe English eyes, but it's not the same. Do you want to say anything about that, Jay?
What would be the dates for these Talmudic references?
That's very hard to date because I think that, as my understanding is, the Talmud was gradually added to over centuries. So I think just talking ex cathedra, is that the word, or no? Maybe off the cuff, maybe might be a better way of putting it. I think from the 4th to the 8th century
So these would
was
have
the time
predated
frame that the
Islam, is all
Talmud.
I need to know. That's what I need to know. Did they
Oh,
predate
okay.
Islam?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah.
there would have been the Muhammad. That word would have been there prior to Islam. So
Yeah.
that could easily have been confused, referring to the Muhammad that came later. But we're not saying that at this point.
No, we're not. I don't think it's strong enough. Now, some people might be persuaded, oh, that maybe that's like, because basically Muhammad was someone who said prayers in the temple. Now, if there were someone going around in the 7th century saying prayers on the Temple Mount, and he was referred to as a Muhammad, and then people misheard it and said, "Oh, what's this Muhammad? Oh, he's saying it's a Mahomet or no." But I'm not going down that road. I'm not making that argument. And I don't think it's a good argument because I'm sure the linguist would say, but there's a nine there. There's a nine in the middle, so I'm not making that argument. But it's interesting, and credit to Red Judaism for pointing that out to us a number of years ago. Anyway, we'll move on. I think we kind of covered this.
Okay,
Um,
let's just
so
continue.
I'm going to, yeah. So now, regarding Jewish writings that made messianic claims, however, this is worth covering. So here is from a source from 617, 637. The Holy One, blessed be He, will produce at that time Messiah ben Joseph, whose name is Nehemiah ben Huziel. He will approach Jerusalem and capture it, and all Israel will hear and gather themselves to him. It parallels Surah 4:172. Never would the Messiah disdain to be a servant of Allah, nor would the angels near to him. And whoever disdains his worship and is arrogant, he will gather them to himself altogether. So the idea of the Messiah gathering people together is part of the messianic expectation. We also have this one. It's from Pirkei Hekhalot Rabati. 40 years before Messiah bin David comes, whose name is Menahim bin Amiel, will come Nehemiah bin Huziel, a man of Ephraim bin Joseph, and he will stand forth in Jerusalem and cause all Israel to gather to him. And Shirvan, king of Persia, will pierce Nehemiah bin Huziel. During the same period, between 617 and 657, the 40 years of Jewish expectation of the Messiah bin David, the Doctrina Jacobi places an anonymous false prophet and says he is proclaiming the arrival of the coming anointed one, Messiah. So it's mad coincidence, but at the same time as Jewish people were expecting the Messiah to come, you have this reference in the Doctrina Jacobi, which is actually, as it happens, to be about Jews who convert to Christianity. So this is material that would be familiar to them. It talks about a false prophet proclaiming that the Messiah was coming. Now, I think that needs to be borne into account. I don't believe in massive coincidences like this. And I think our critics need to take this into account. This offers us an alternative historical explanation for what was going on at the time, which is that there are people going around prophetically saying that the Messiah is coming, and that's all it is, you know. And probably one of these people stood out from the rest and was called the prophet. And I think this is where the story begins with how Islam developed from there, you know. But it's not the Messiah. Sorry, it's not the Muhammad of the standard Islamic narrative. It's something else. Okay.
Okay, so thank you so much, Mel. It's great to have you clear all these up. I'm glad that we've gone through them. So much of this is in some ways is we're now repeating what we've done in the past. We've been going through the Mahmoud argument. How long have we been really on this, Mel? Would you say about a year, 2 years?
Yeah, yeah, probably 2 years.
2 years.
Probably
Okay.
2 years.
And it's fascinating that it's only coming back to hammer. People are hammering us in just 1 month, 1 month since they've heard it. Now, it could be
Yeah.
that they've done other work beyond that. I think Mary says that she has been actually working on this longer than that. But I think it's interesting that the Muslims aren't coming back to us on this. It's only Christians who are coming back to us on this. And I would love for Muslims, because I'm really my target are not other Christians. My targets and neither of our targets are other Christians. We're already saved. We already know where we're going. We already have Jesus, the Mahdi,
Yeah.
who is already died on the cross and rose again. It's the Muslims that we really want to target. And it would be great if Muslims would take what we're saying and try to unpack it and try to see if they have problems with it, because they're the ones really that need to answer this argument. In the debate that I did last week with uh, Raymond Ibrahim, when you look at the debate, it was a debate that was set up really to answer the question, who is or did the Muhammad of Islam exist? That was the title of the debate. They say it was the title that we challenged Raymond to because of the fact that he came up very clearly in his two videos in April saying, I don't even have to look at Jay's videos. I know how to prove that Muhammad existed. It turns out that Muhammad that he was supporting is really a historical Muhammad or Mahmud, or whichever way you want to put it, not the Muhammad of Islam. He did not want to take that on. I now understand why he wanted to go first. I couldn't figure out why he wanted to go first since we were doing the challenge. It would make sense that I would go first and
I
set
actually
the
thought
tone
you
of the
were on
debate.
this. I actually thought in the debate that you were on the same page, really. The
Did you
you know
notice I
the
did say
perception
that in
that
the
you were.
debate? Notice I
Yeah.
did say that. In some ways, it became a non-debate because we both
Yeah.
agree that there was someone named Muhammad or Mahmud, as we're saying. Could have been Muhammad. I would
Yeah.
suggest it's still Mahmud because as late as
Yeah.
7:05, we're still seeing that. Even in
Yeah.
7:30, it's interesting you didn't
Yeah.
put up the 7:30 inscription by John of Damascus, where it's very clear. It's in Greek, Mamed. So there, even at 7:30, well into the eighth century, he was still being referred to as Muhammad. So someone named Muhammad did exist. Someone named Muhammad, if you want to put it, if you want to introduce that or impose that on the Greek, that's fine, but it doesn't work in the Greek. Someone named Muhammad did receive or was writing a book or a number of books, because even as John of Damascus says, it was a number of books. And also, someone was introduced or influenced by an Arian monk. So that's where the Arianism, the anti-Trinitarian, the divinity of Jesus and the sonship of Jesus are so much attacked all the way through this book that eventually became the Quran. So that we're both agreed upon. I don't think where Raymond and I are disagreed on that. We do know that there is someone named Muhammad. What I was more interested in is that all these references that they were putting up, and you and I went and did a video 2 weeks ago, going to every one of these 30 references in the 7th century, not the 8th century, but the 7th century, and we're seeing that almost in every case these were Saracens. These were people who called themselves Ishmaelites, or these were people who called themselves Hagarenes or Magre, all of which mean in the line of Hagar, in the line of Ishmael, which is, we know, were the people who were in what is today Jordan, the Nabatean Aramaic people. In fact, the Umayyads were primarily from this group. So we have no problem with the word Mahmud himself, because at some point there has to be someone from which Muhammad then is placed. All I'm saying, and all that we have been saying, and this is what was fascinating in the debate, I was really hoping that Raymond Ibrahim would defend the Muhammad of Islam, the Muhammad of the standard Islamic narrative, that Muhammad, because that's the Muhammad that Muslims are defending. And that Muhammad is not the Muhammad that Raymond Ibrahim was defending. He was just defending the historical Muhammad or the historical character or this person who got this material from an Aryan monk. He was just defending, well, so does everybody know that. So what is there to defend?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to defend on that point. We're both saying the same thing. At some point, and I don't think Raymond's able to do this because this is not his area of expertise. I find that now by doing that debate. I realize I got the wrong guy to really do the debate. I need somebody, really a Muslim, to really defend this. I want a Muslim to defend. You need to defend your Muhammad, who is called Muhammad, because remember, they're saying he was called Muhammad in the 7th century, not Muhammad. They're not, or whatever the word you want to use. Or, and he certainly wasn't a Saracen. And the Muhammad that I want to see defended is the Muhammad of the standard Islamic narrative, who lived in Mecca, not way up in the north, not in Syria or Jordan or Iraq or Iran. I want the Muhammad who lived in Mecca and who received this book called the Quran in two different cities over a period of 22 years, all 114 surahs, and all before 632, before that time period that the Muslims claim. Now that was not debated at all, and I was spending all my time kind of talking past Raymond the whole time, and I don't. I'm most of the crowd got it. A lot of his. I went up on his site and I looked at all the comments on his site because he had changed it to "Did Muhammad exist?" He took out Muhammad of Islam and just put "Did Muhammad exist?" So very clever. He knew that he didn't want to have to defend the Muhammad of Islam. And in some ways, it was a waste of time for both of us. We spent 3 hours really coming to the same conclusion. Here's what's fascinating. Look at the comments on his site, on his YouTube site. They are absolutely angered at me, calling me arrogant, calling me all kinds of names that I won't repeat here, because I changed the whole term, the whole tenure of the debate. When in reality, I didn't change anything. If anything, it was Raymond that changed the tenor because he knew that he cannot really defend the Muhammad of Islam, and he didn't want to. But here's the irony. If he cannot defend the, and this is where I'm saying also to Mary and to the daughter of Christ and also to Jai and also to Thaddeus. If you cannot defend the Muhammad of Islam, that Muhammad, not the Muhammad or not the character who is in way up in the north, who was with a sword destroying Christians and Jews. And yes, Mary, he was destroying Christians and Jews. I don't know where she gets this idea that I didn't that I said that these were not Christians and Jews. She was destroying our own people. But if you cannot defend that Muhammad, the Muhammad of Islam, the Muhammad who requires those four things, and listen, I could have added another 12 or 13. Those are just four for simplicity. If you can't defend that Muhammad, then why in the world are you spending all your time attacking that Muhammad? Look at all their videos. Look what Thaddeus and Mary love to do. They love to attack that
Yeah.
Muhammad. They love to attack all his embarrassing characteristics. They spend all their time. David Wood, his whole career is based on attacking that Muhammad. If that's
Yeah.
not the Muhammad you're attacking, then for heaven's sakes, which Muhammad are you defending? Because which Muhammad is
Mhm.
Mary and which Muhammad is Thaddeus and Jai and daughter of Christ defending? They're not defending that Muhammad. They're defending the historical Muhammad, which is not something in question. We all know that. That's already a given. We know that there was someone that finally was given that title, and we don't know yet when that happened. I'm just guessing in August of 2025. It happened probably in the mid 8th century, possibly by the time that John of Damascus was writing, or it could have been in the ninth. Looks like we're getting some reference. It may even happen later than that. But I'm not interested in defending the precursor. I'm not interested in defending the archetype like they are. And they have no right to defend that archetype since their whole career, all of their videos are based on the Muhammad of history. That's the Muhammad they're attacking. If they're going to attack that Muhammad that they believe existed, that Muhammad, then they've got to prove it. And that was not done in this debate. And I don't think that Mary can do that. I don't think Mary can
No.
defend, or Thaddeus, or
But
John, or daughter of Christ. I don't think they can defend that Muhammad. We'll see.
I
Now,
heard I heard a co-
go ahead, go ahead. Love. Come back to me on
yeah,
what you
sorry.
said.
I heard a comment that she said at the end of her debate with Robert Spencer that, well, even if Muhammad didn't exist, I certainly believe that Mecca existed. Do you remember that? That was towards the end of her debate.
Listen, I
She made
didn't see
this
the debate. I've not
extraordinary.
watched it. I was busy. I was
Yeah.
in
Uh,
Dearborn at that time. I was all over the world. I mean, not all over America.
so
I've
I
just come out from Minneapolis and from Dearborn, so I've missed that.
so I thought that was extraordinary. And one of the so she's 100% convinced now that Mecca existed, and it was this amazing metropolis, and with all this trade and so forth. And she took issue with you, Jay, for questioning Mecca with your arguments to do with trade, Patricia Crona and so forth. And lo and behold, I went to her website, and just from a few years ago, her page is still up, and she makes exactly the same arguments that you make against Mecca. But it was only just a few years ago. So what's changed? What's happened? How come her arguments were fine a few years ago? She hasn't taken the article down. Maybe we could show some screenshots here from her website. So what's changed? I think she needs to respond to that and say, well, does she still stand over the arguments that she made then, or has she changed her mind? And why has she changed her mind? If those arguments were solid back then, how come she's now throwing those arguments under the bus? It seems like she's thrown them under the bus because you said them, but when she said them, they were perfectly fine arguments. So
Okay.
that needs answering.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about Mary Harb. I don't know. I've never met her. Everybody seems to be throwing me things from her, and I just said, listen, I don't have the time to watch her. And I did watch her about 10 minutes, and I got tired. She's so emotional. I, I find to
Yeah.
realize that we have to be careful with Mary. I think Mary has said that she wants to debate me a number of times, and she keeps on saying I'm running away from the debates. And I'll answer this. This is what happened when I was at Speaker's Corner for 25 years. Every Muslim who came up to said, "I want to debate you. I want to debate you. I can destroy you on this. I can destroy you on that, and I will wipe the floor with you." And I used to always say, "Listen, I'm not the person you need to debate because I only debate Muslim scholars." And I don't debate other Christians if I can help it. In fact, the only time I've ever done this debate now, interesting, except for Raymond, with Christians, are two other debates that I did in 1997 with Dr. David Marshall and also in 2011 with Dr. Chaukat Mukherjee on this very thing that they're confronting us on. Both those debates were in-house debates for Christians only, and on the thing, should we use polemics? And number two, should we use historical criticism? And both Dr. David
Do we?
Marshall and Dr. Chakat Mukherjee says we should not use polemics and we should not use historical criticism. And I said, yes, we should. So I've been having this same debate since 1997. It's going on 28 years now. I've been trying to defend the need to continue to use historical criticism, but from Christians, not from Muslims. And now we're
Yeah.
getting it again
You,
in just the last week. Go ahead.
no, just you may have forgotten. You also had the debate, of course, with David Wood on the question, did Muhammad exist? So
You're right.
that's really just yeah, the
Yeah,
other area.
yeah. So it was with
So
David as well. So let me just say to Mary and all these dear souls who want to debate me, like everybody else that wants to debate me, because this is the debate that I would love to do with a Muslim. This is a Muslim that needs to defend Mecca, not necessarily a Christian or somebody else. I want to see a Muslim defend Mecca. I am going to be doing a debate on the Quran, on the preservation of the Quran in January with a Muslim. So that's been set up. And that I would really like to see how a Muslim is going to defend the preservation of the Quran, that not one word, not one letter has been changed in the last 1400 years. That's a debate I'm willing to. I'm not going to be wasting my time on just anybody that comes up to me and says, I want to debate. I demand a debate. And you're running away from me and you're scared of me because you won't debate. That's what Muslims said to me all the time for 25 years. And I think, be careful, be careful. There are only so many people I will debate. Look at the whole number of people that I have debated. If you look at all the Muslims that I have debated, every one of them is either an authority on their area, or they are well known, or that they are bringing many people to the debate. Many others. Raymond Ibrahim. In some ways, I've had to do that challenge because of the two videos that came up in in April, and because of how massive the talk I gave at Calvary Chapel went universally around the world. So therefore, we had to, rather than him coming back and say you've misinterpreted me or you reappropriated what I said, rather than get back this tit for tat, I said let's just have a debate on the subject, which is a subject I never really wanted to debate yet. This is not a subject I don't think we're ready really to finalize, because what people are not saying is they don't want to debate the Muhammad of Islam. What they want to debate is, how did Muhammad come about? How did finally the Muhammad of Islam come to being? Where did this Muhammad come from? That's really what people want to debate in the West. Muslims don't want to debate this at all. You can see why, because if we could show that the Muhammad of Islam, that man who said the things he said and did the things he did, if we can show that he did was historical, man, oh man, you can see everything comes crashing down. Now, we're going to be doing that. Hatun and I are going to be doing that next week. We're going to confront both the Sirah of Muhammad and the Hadith of Muhammad next Wednesday. So watch this
Right.
space, because we're going to actually quote the best Muslim scholars in how they now know that their Muhammad existed and did what he did and said what he said. Wait till you see what they are saying. And this is material that's just come out in the last month. I kid you not, it's just come out in the last month. But that's next Wednesday.
Fantastic.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say before we end?
Um, yeah, I suppose just to be kind of conciliatory a little bit, um, just to those who watch Thaddeus and Mary's channel, remember what we're trying to do. We're focusing on the arguments. We're not focusing on the personalities. We don't want this personality clash, you know, going on. It's purely we're interested in the arguments, and we're not watching your channels. As much as you keep sending us messages, please watch this video or that video. We don't have time. We're busy people, so that's it.
Can I say just one other thing? And that is, if people are going to confront us, do so quickly and stop these 3 hours and 5 hours and 8 hour diatribes against us. Please, I've
Yeah,
not watched any of them for
keep it
one
brief.
very good reason, but I have friends who are watching them, and I say, could just tell me briefly what they said. And what they're coming back is, a lot of it is hate against you, Jay, and certainly a lot of hate against you, Mel. And I think, please, would you
Yeah.
stop that? For people who are writing in the comments, also, would you stop this hatred against people? Can you keep it to the arguments at hand? Can we keep it to the material that we're working with? And also realize that we are going to make changes as we find new material. We're the first, really, who else is doing what we're doing? I can't think of anybody else who's actually confronting the book, the
Yeah.
man, and the place historically. No one else is doing it on the internet. No one else is doing it on YouTube. Others are now starting to do it, but they don't have the platform that Mel, you and I have, or that Al Fadi has. Al Fadi, who is with Sira International, has double the number of subscribers that I have. And that's why I'm there with him so much. Much of my material, he gets it before I get it. I always put it up on his video channel, his YouTube channel, long before I put it up on my channel, because he is the one that needs it more than anybody else, because he is the
Yeah.
Arab. He is the one that speaks the language. He is the one that comes from Saudi Arabia. He is the one, if there was a Qurayshi dialect, he would be speaking it. And he is the one also who is just about to finish his doctorate on the Sana'a manuscript. Wait till that comes out, folks, and wait to see what he is finding. It's going to be exciting. Lots of good stuff yet to do. That's part of the historical argument. And Al Fadi is right on board with us. He's right on board with us. And I would suggest, once his doctorate is finished, watch out, because then you'll be seeing him taking on Muslims right, left, and center all over the world. God bless you.
Excellent.
Okay, I think we've done enough for now. And I think if there's people who do want to come back to us, there's the comments right there at the bottom. Do comment and tell us where we're wrong. Put it in bullet points. Don't do long diatribes, nothing paragraphs long, just in bullet points. And Mel and I, we will come back if we find that we've made a mistake or we have not quoted it correctly. If we are not coming to the same conclusion that we should, that's what we need to know. That's what we need to know, okay? So use the comments to do that. Until next time, this is Mel and me. Over and out.